Good evening, everyone. Welcome to the Sports Corner with the Con Man. I am your host, the Con Man, on the Sports Empire Network. I have with me my man, Mike Semio, and a very special guest, Mr. Bakari. First of all, Mike, how you doing?
I'm doing well, Michael. How are you?
Good. I'm doing very well. I have my special guest, Mr. Bakari. For those of you who do not know, Mr. Bakari was a standout player at URI. He's from Detroit, and he also played high school ball with Jalen Rose. Now, first of all, Mr. Bakari, how you doing, my friend?
I am doing well, Mike. Thank you so much for inviting me on the show.
Now, Mr. Bakari, out of respect, how was it like playing with Jalen Rose in Detroit, of all places? Oh, by the way, you was also in the documentary of the Fab Five. Am I correct?
That is correct, yes.
So how was it like playing with Mr. Jalen Rose?
To say the least, Jalen Rose was probably the first lefty that I had to guard in my college career. And it was quite interesting that once having to play and guard him on a regular basis, that guarding lefties became a specialty of mine, because being at Jalen at 6'7" and me being at 6'8", and in the early 90s, we were all considered fives, meaning the center spot. And when Jalen left Southwestern to go to the University of Michigan, to everyone's surprise, he actually played point guard. So you really kind of like saw the transition of big men that went from a five that could play the three, that could play the one position. And so playing against him and having him a teammate in practice and in the high school ranks was really a pleasure. But I'd be remiss without saying that we also had some other great NBA basketball players on our high school team as well, outside of Jalen. We also had Vashawn Leonard, who went on to play at Minnesota, then went on to play with the Miami Heat and with the Denver Nuggets. And a couple of years prior to that, we also had Howard Isley, who went to Boston College and was the premier backup for the Utah Jazz.
Wow. Now, before I let Mike dive in, how was it? Because you guys had a rivalry with Providence College. I want to know how you felt about that. Matter of fact, one of our good friends, well, maybe one of my good friends, Troy Brown, hit me up when I told him you were going to come on the show, and he said you guys hate each other. Not you personally, but your teams hate each other. How was that rivalry like?
Well, upon arriving in Rhode Island, the alumni for the University of Rhode Island were the ones who really kind of had us pitted against Providence College because of just the big rivalry. I mean, I had an opportunity to see the rivalry prior to coming to Rhode Island in '92, and I believe it was the prior year that there was a fight that broke out at the convention center between the two teams, and so it really showed me that there was a true rivalry between the two schools. But what a lot of folks don't know and realize is that during the off season, especially in the summertime, we all played with each other at Alumni Hall in the summer when we would come back for summer school. So we actually had some really, really interesting competitive matches in Alumni Hall during the summers of '93 and '94, where you had your Dickie Sitkins, your Mike Browns, your Abdullah. We had our Abdul Fox, we had our Kyle Ivy Jones. So it was quite interesting to have those guys, including Andre Samuel and Carlos Cofield with us. So it was more the alumni, if anything, that had hate for each other. We as players were more so just, competing. And so to this day, I have great friendships with, like a Trent Forbes, with the Corey Wrights, with the Troy Browns, even Quentin Burton that played there. So, there's nothing but love, when you're a basketball player, as you're competitive with each other when you're on that court, but then outside the court, we were all, from different inner cities from across the country that was at two different institutions that was in the state of Rhode Island, and that we were all just trying to compete. We were all trying to get an opportunity to play, collegiately, but also the opportunity to be able to play professionally. And then at the end of the day, walk away with a degree with zero due at the end of the 4 or 5 years we were there.
Exactly. And now I gotta get my man Mike Samuel to chime in. Mike, what you got to say, my man?
So it was great to meet you. I actually spent some time in the last couple of days looking at your career and looking at the years spanned, and I believe you crossed paths with Timmy O'Shea as one of your assistants. So Timmy and I, way back when, were our teammates, were competitors back in the late 70s, early 80s. We participated on a youth games team that won a gold medal in the late 70s. So Timmy and I go way back, and he ends up coaching at my alma mater for over 10 years and had a pretty successful career there. So it was interesting kind of walking through that and seeing who was involved. So what was that like, kind of going through with that many coaches and those players and that kind of competition back then?
Well, one of the things that I think a lot of folks don't realize is that in the early 90s, the Atlantic 10 Conference was one of the top 5 conferences in the country. And at that time, we had the West Virginias, the Rutgers that was in the conference, along with Temple. George Washington was a very strong powerhouse at that time. And then, of course, UMass were #1 team in the country going into my junior year, where they had the Marcus Camby. So having the coaching staff of Bill O'Shea, Tim, you had Bill Cohen, who's at Northeastern now. That was our assistant coach. We had Timmy O'Shea, obviously Al Skinner. And then we had a transition of like the third assistants that were coming in. So like we had, Al always reserved a spot for either a former player or a basketball player on his coaching staff to give them an opportunity. So we saw a Mike Brown from California that was with us. We even had Jamie Benton as an assistant coach at URI during my time. And then we all had a Garland Mance, who was my teammate in high school from Southwestern, that went to St. Bonaventures, that was there. And then my senior year, we had Ed Coley, who was our assistant coach. So when you're talking about the different assistant coaches who have all gone on to be head coaches in their own right and run their own program, we really did have a great coaching staff to lead us in a competitive conference like the Atlantic 10.
Now, I want to bring it back a little bit. When I first met you. Now, we at Monty Park, we have one of the best shootouts, I believe, in the country. And you were part of it with Providence. We had, matter of fact, New Bedford only won one shootout in my 40 years there. They only had one shootout.
Wow, I didn't know that.
We had 8 NBA ball players. Dwayne McClain, who went to Villanova, played for the 76ers. Wayne Turner, who went to Kentucky, played for the Celtics. Dana Barrows, who went to BC, played for the Celtics. On and on and on and on. What, if you don't mind, what was your take on the shootout we had at New Bedford and your experiences? Because you were there quite a bit.
Well, one, I have to say that it was enjoyable playing in your tournament, in the Monty tournament. And the competition was clearly there. And for it to be an outdoor basketball tournament, that was something that was different. And especially, being a kid from Detroit, I very rarely went and played in the projects. So to come to New Bedford, to play in the projects, being an out-of-stater and that not be our home turf, no one knew who we were. So, there was a little bit of an intimidation factor that was there because, throughout history, we've always heard about, the different, shootings, this, that, and the other. But one of the things I have to say is this. At no point did I or any of my teammates from Providence that represented Providence in your tournament ever feared for our life playing in your tournament. You clearly had control. You clearly had the right officials on the court. The residents in the area recognized what it is that you brought to the table and knew that if one person messed it up, then it goes away. So to the testament of you doing that for 40 years and not and me, even just last Saturday was in New Bedford and we were able to cross paths because of a local Masadi Caldwell.
Yes.
That gave us that comfort level, like, nothing is going to happen to you guys here. It's all love. And it truly was just that. So excuse my ignorance about the projects of New Bedford, but you guys definitely made a brother feel like he was at home.
Well, I want to thank you for that. And best believe it was in the projects. For real. It was in the projects. You know what I mean? And the place was packed. We had so many tremendous players and a lot of great turnouts as well. But I want to thank you for coming down with Providence. I mean, you guys were tough. You had some ball players, man. You know what I mean? Masadi, you guys had some boat. We can go on and on and on and on and on and on. But I mean, it was a joy. I mean, me doing 40 years, my memory, so many teams, but I definitely remember you guys, Kyle Ivory with his rambunctious way. I'll leave it at that. We'll leave it at that. You know what I mean?
But I will say this to answer your question. Your tournament was clearly a competitive tournament, and New Bedford always played us hard. We always seem to find ourselves in the championship game against Boston. And so that was kind of like where everybody really just was like, I mean, there was no seats available, stand room only outside. And it was just all out war. And at the end of it all, everybody broke bread. Everybody showed love. There was no animosity. And you know what? We returned every year to try to try to knock them off, or they were trying to knock us off. And then, of course, New Bedford and Brockton were always there to try to make sure that they was in the mix as well.
Absolutely. Mike, you got anything to chime in, my man?
Well, I do, Michael. You and I talk a lot. How come I never got invited to this? 40 years of that tournament? How come I never got invited? I'm like up the street.
I don't know. Yo, yeah. I ran the tournament. I didn't pick the teams. You know what I'm saying? So me, Peter Brittle, and Eric, we ran the tournament.
Yeah, but I knew all those guys, right? You know that.
Yeah, absolutely. You should have been there. No doubt about it. But
40 years? I didn't know it was 40 years, but good for you.
Yes.
That's a great accomplishment. Not to tease you any further about me not getting invited, but that's okay.
Yeah, 40 years, man. Went by pretty quick, man. And, after 40 years, you've seen so many great players and so many great people, and you have a lot of good people that, make contact with. And I'm blessed to have all the friends that I have and who I come in contact with. And it's a blessing. Now, Mr. Bakari, my man, the reason I really got you on the show, besides your great basketball at URI, you are doing something right now that to me is very, very important. And I would love to have you talk about exactly what you're doing now, because we played back in the day, but what you're doing now is crucial and important for our youth and for the future. Let the folks know what you're doing.
So I decided about 14 years ago to create a nonprofit organization called Lights and Sirens International. And finding myself working in law enforcement, I quickly saw the health and wellness of the men and women that serve in public service. So we created Lights and Sirens International for law enforcement, public safety officials to come down to the Dominican Republic, where we host an international basketball tournament, where we give public safety the opportunity to feel like they're a civilian, to work on themselves. But more importantly, I also saw that, in the state of Rhode Island, that we have the second largest population of Dominicans outside of New York. And looking at history and how law enforcement was developed, and it was initially developed to, capture runaway slaves. They were essentially created to help the wealthy. And so there's been a long-standing history with law enforcement that has been a negative image, and particularly to the African-American minority community. So we wanted to try to see if we could correct the wrongs from the past by giving these men and women the opportunity to come to the Dominican Republic, see the culture, and then as they go back out and do their work in the community, that they look at it, they look at the culture in a different lens. They don't take that the loud music or the loud talking or just the way that they conduct and carry themselves is something that is being of disrespect. And so over the last 14 years, we have been able to host the international basketball tournament, but also do humanitarian work so that we could show the community that there are human beings behind the badge and the gun. And so since the pandemic in the last 4 years, we really started to do more work here locally in Rhode Island, where we've been trying to bridge the gap between law enforcement and the community by using cornhole, bocce as a tool to kind of like break that barrier, because those are social games. I've played basketball both on a high school, collegiate, and professional level. And so when you try to bring the community together to bridge that gap, as you know, basketball is a very chippy sport. And so I have seen where we've had events with the community where a civilian might feel like, oh, did the officer foul me a little harder than he should have, or vice versa. And then now you kind of lose the whole point of trying to have a dialogue. Because in my 50 years, I have yet to see anything come good out of an argument Whereas when you actually have a discussion or conversation, people are a little bit more level-headed. So Lights and Sirens International has done just that, is that we have been bridging the gap between with law enforcement and the minority community. And we touch on different topics that we feel that are humane. Ego. I think everybody and their mother has an ego. Some people may say it's pride, but ego, what I have learned, it's a mofo, because it jumps out before your real conscience really address when there is a conflict that is ensuing and taking place. And so we've been able to identify that with the community and with law enforcement, that each one has an ego. And we most recently have said that, nothing ever comes good when two alphas collide. When alphas collide, it's like no one's backing down until someone gets hurt. And it's just how the animal kingdom is. And so then we started looking at accountability. I think that you gentlemen may agree that we live in a society right now that usually the finger is pointing out and never pointing back at the individual themselves. And so we try to, address the fact that, there's got to be accountability on both sides of the spectrum here. And so with that, we then end up looking at, profiling. We all have implicit bias. Through all of our growing up and through all of our different experiences, we all have different implicit bias. I am always questioning about, instead of a greeting of hello, how are you? Like, Jesus Christ, how tall are you? And it's just one of those things that it's like, it's the delivery system. It's the way that you talk to a human being that a person is going to be guarded based on how you approach them. Right. So we've been taking these subtle these subtle similarities and bringing it to the fold for both sides to see, to then now be able to have a genuine conversation, because there's been small bad actors that represent the minority community. There is small bad actors in law enforcement that have made law enforcement look like they're the culprit. And so we're trying to define and just, again, get past a lot of the different hatreds and the different experience and interactions that folks have had with law enforcement. And so we're seeing some success with that. It's taken time. But, we're patient. We understand that, this is something that we're in for the long haul. And so the fact that we're on a show like this to be able to talk about what our nonprofit organization is doing is really helping to get the message out there.
And now, for the folks who are watching, if they want to contribute or volunteer, how would they be able to do that?
Well, we definitely have our website, which is www.lightsandsirens.international.org. We are on social media platforms on Facebook and Instagram. And we also have our own YouTube page as Lights and Sirens International, where we have started to document a lot of our interactions that we do with the community and with public safety officials. Because one of the other factors that we feel that is happening, and again, kudos to you guys for doing what you do, is that the media also plays a factor in how a lot of things are portrayed on the general body. Most of the news that I think we all see is usually 80% bad and then 20% good, or maybe 70%, but it's definitely not 50-50. So we want to try to put the information out there on our social media platforms, on our website, so that if those who see what we're doing would love to contribute, you can do that right on our Lights and Sirens International website page.
Well, I am. And also, we had Mike Myers. I don't know if you're familiar with him. He is the commissioner of the MBA, which is the Military Basketball Association. And he's been on our show about at least three times. And I'm not saying it was because of us, but this past weekend, he was on CBS, the championship games. So what you're saying, social media does help. and we're going to be there to help you out. You got the man right there, Mike Samuel, who has more connections. So we're going to do the damn thing, and hopefully we can make some kind of contribution to what you're doing, because I believe in what you're doing, my friend.
Well, thank you so much, both Mikes, for again having us on this show and giving us a platform to be able to talk about not only about me personally, but more importantly, to talk about the nonprofit and what we have been doing. You know, I would be remiss to not mention this, but one of the other things that we have found that we have been graciously been blessed with is that we also are networking our partner with the National Police in the Dominican Republic, where we have just given this year through the assistance of the Dallas Police Department and Memphis Police Department, where we were able to donate brand new gun holsters, clip holsters, utility belts, and handcuffs to the National Police in the Dominican Republic. Because they themselves are now transitioning and coming out of that third world country mentality because right now they're the #1 tourist destination in the world. And so we have partnered with them to help them to strengthen their bond and what they're doing in their community. And we have the opportunity now through the legal use of ATVs and dirt bikes. We will now be our nonprofit organization will be receiving those that are seized from some of the local municipalities here in Rhode Island for us to ship to the DR to hand over to the National Police in the Dominican Republic so that they can use those ATVs for beach patrols, some of the remote areas outside of the capital city, Santiago, Santo Domingo, Puerto Plata. And so we're really excited about this because this really is going to help give them the better tools and necessities to be able to do their job efficiently.
Go ahead, Mike.
I wanted to go back for a quick second. When you were talking about the relationships that you're building with neighborhoods and trying to create this dialogue, what do you see as the end result to that? And what does that actually, when does that actually come out where you can actually say, okay, this is what we've done and this is what we've accomplished? I'd be curious to understand that.
Well, I would first have to say that we've definitely got a lot of pushback. And when we've done this work, we were doing this right in the height of the pandemic. Mm-hmm. So the George Floyd incident really helped bring a lot of eyes to the table of a lot of the heinous issues that have happened to minorities historically in this country. And so it initiated the woke culture to see what is here. And so we've had our challenges because, you know, the perception of us is that we are, you know, that we're pro-police, and it is true, but we're also pro-life, we're pro-Black, and you have a minority that is standing at the middle, bringing both the community and law enforcement to the fold to be able to have the conversation. You know, because this conversation is so difficult and because there's so much emotions that's involved, we had to try to figure out how to approach this where folks could feel comfortable. And so from a cultural standpoint, playing basketball over in Italy, I was introduced to the game of bocce. And so to be on historic Federal Hill in Providence, Rhode Island, they actually have 2 bocce courts. So about 12 years ago, while I was walking by, a group of people were playing. They saw me looking and they all asked. It was like, hey, Ibn. It was like, no, not Ibn. It was like, hey, would you like to play? And I was like, sure, I would love to play. And they was like, do you know how to play? And to their surprise, because the majority of them were all white, if not all white, they were surprised that I actually knew how to play. Mm-hmm. So to play this game and to see how it's a social game and a game that I kind of like associate with life, because the obstacle of getting to that white pilina isn't always straightforward. Sometimes you have to take a detour. Sometimes you got to come from the backside, depending on what rules you play. So I started looking at the game like it was life, similar to basketball. Basketball is associated with, with life principles. And so we use that by going into some of the schools, going to the rec centers and getting folks to buy in. And so this past year, last year, we actually had one of our best groups to come to the fold, where the recreation center, they came and there was hesitation. The kids clearly had hesitation the first week. We do a 5 free week bocce ball program in the summer, starting in July. And after the first week, the same kids showed up the second week. The third week, we saw the same kids come back. The fourth. By the fifth week, this group actually showed up with their own T-shirts, bocce ball team, because now they saw what we were what we were presenting to them. And then we had the state police, Providence Fire, all come to this event and be able to interact with these young men and women. And so a lot of them got a chance to go into the squad cars. A lot of them got a chance to put on the uniform of a firefighter. And I have to say this, it was more the girls that had an interest in the firefighters than the boys for last year. And a lot of the girls actually didn't believe that they could actually be a firefighter. So when you're asking a question as to how this dynamic came, it's been a process, and it's still a process, because there's still a lot of mixed feelings that folks have and mistrust that folks have towards law enforcement. And so that is something that's going to require time and patience, but we are seeing some of the benefits of our program.
It's interesting that you created this voice where there's been a void, right? And I think that's what you were referring to earlier, that it's never a straight line as far as how you're going to communicate, and being this creative is pretty cool to hear. So it's really nice to hear.
Well, thank you. Sometimes I think I at one point I thought I was out of my mind, doing this, because it was, I was knocking on doors, I was going here, going there, and wasn't getting the responses that I felt. But then once we started talking the language to some of these young individuals, especially those that are like now getting their driver's permit and getting their driver's license, a lot more of them that are going to be on the road are going to have more interaction with law enforcement than they were when they were walking on foot or taking a bus to the various locations that they go. So one of the things we wanted to do is like, hey, listen, driver's ed is not going to teach you what we're teaching. We're trying to give you some of the social skills that this generation needs to have, because you can't communicate texting somebody. You need to be able to talk. And so that's one of the things that we're trying to teach these young men and women is, when you shake a person's hand, look them in the eye, talk to a person, approach people so that, they know who you are. We all have bad days. All of us have bad days. And sometimes there's folks that roll up with me at the wrong time. But I also have to look within myself and control my anger, my attitude, because they don't know what's going on me, and that's vice versa. So these are the type of conversations that we have, and to be able to break that barrier, that we, again, are seeing success. And we're now starting to see that there are folks that are believing what we're doing because of the consistency in what we're doing.
Now, let me ask you a question. For those young individuals, because our show was seen all over the country, what advice would you give to them as far as if they have any kind of, I don't know, maybe opposition or anything? What would you tell them? Because they'll be watching.
Well, one of the things, that's a good question, because there are different opinions about the information that we're giving out, and yet we're still seeing innocent individuals get brutally beaten and murdered. So for me to say that as a young person, one, I would say this: responding what to your mother, your father, your uncle, your family members is not the correct response that you would give an adult.
Right.
I think that you are supposed to say yes. I think that you would start off saying yes, sir, yes, ma'am. But the what is something that kind of goes up my backside backwards when I hear it. And I was just like, ooh, I would have got slapped, yoked up,
Absolutely.
kicked, punched.
Oh.
You know, something would have been flying at my head. And so to get to the point, the delivery system is something that all human beings have to work on. I think that when you find yourself interacting with a law enforcement official, I would say first and foremost, be compliant. Regardless if the individual is being disrespectful, this, that, and the other, you're not going to win that argument or situation. The key is for you to walk away and get home safely. That would be my number one thing that I would say that you do. Now, we do live in the days of technology where you can pull your phone out. You can make a phone call if you need to go video chat, as most folks do. Then do that. But again, do it in a respectful way. And then I would say to law enforcement personnel, the way that you approach people, that's also going to cause a person to have anxiety. When those lights, I actually asked this question in our program by a show of hands, meaning the civilians and law enforcement, by a show of hands, who is guilty of speeding? And everybody hand goes up. I'm like, who's guilty of using their directionals every single time? Hands go up. It's like, who's guilty of yielding at a yield sign or going through a red light? And, the hands go up. Then I say, law enforcement, this question is for you. Do any of you, the hairs on the back of your neck go up when you're in your personal vehicle and you're getting pulled over? And they say yes. So anxiety is something that every person feels when those lights hit you, because now you're like, oh my God, what did I do? So now it's about, taking precaution. One of the things that I personally do when I get pulled over, I actually roll down all four windows so that the officer is approaching my vehicle. He can see who's in there. And then I already have my registration and license on the dashboard so that he doesn't feel like, or he or she doesn't feel like I'm doing any sudden movements, so that we can get this thing wrapped up quick, fast, in a hurry so that I can go home safely. Now, there are some folks that say that that's a bit extreme, but that is what I personally do. And I found that has kept me from having any type of negative interaction with law enforcement during a traffic stop.
I think that is very good advice. Now, I want to ask you something real quick. What would be your testimony for you coming on the show, and what do you want to express for the viewers who are tuning in as far as what you're doing and what kind of feedback you might expect?
Testimony.
I know. Hey, I am.
That's a mouthful right there. I would just probably say that I would want folks to be able to just walk away knowing that I have humanity's best interests at heart. And when I say humanity, I mean just that, humanity's interests at the best art from my perspective. Now, one of the things that I've learned in college and in my life is that observation plus perception equals reality. And that mathematical equation is different for everybody. So my testimony would be, I have humanity's interest at heart. And I would hope that folks would at least be objective in what I am saying and have an open mind and be able to look within themselves and say that, what have I contributed to society? And then once you recognize that, then now when you start dealing with others, try to treat your fellow man with respect, but then at the same time, just knowing that the person that you're talking to may not be as respectful as you are, but that's okay. Don't let anybody change who you are and change your mood, because at the end of the day, you are a person, and that you're just trying to do the best that you can in this thing that we call life.
That is exceptional. And before I let my man Mike get in, matter of fact, Mike, you go ahead, because I want to talk about your other entity that you're doing as well. So go ahead, Mike.
Oh, I just wanted to follow up on one thing that was said about those staples of introducing yourself, putting your hand out, looking somebody in the eye, speaking directly to them, and being open to them, right? I think that's part of it. And, one of the things I've experienced in coming from the consulting side is, how do you deal with people? How do you diffuse some things? How do you speak to people? I was having a conversation with a client the other day, and they talked about how you finesse someone, right? How you kind of work with them, try to get their vibe from them as far as how they're feeling and what's coming off of them. And sometimes it's very difficult to feel that through a computer. So with the pandemic, you've sort of lost those touches.
Yep.
But when you enter the real life, I think, the points you're trying to make here, I think are really solid as far as trying to develop that mechanism, or those mechanisms that should exist, which we know they don't, right? It's just not inherent. You have to learn them, and you have to practice them, right? And like anything else. And that gets to be a real art when you can be able to do that and be successful. And you'd be surprised how much that'll open a door, that'll open a relationship, as far as how you get developed with somebody else. So Michael, you mentioned Mike Myers earlier. There's a direct line and introduction here as far as what's really taking place, where you have two men who are trying to help some people from different ends, but I think they can support one another. So that's an easy introduction I think we can make.
Well, that's why he's my co-host. You can see why. He's the man.
Yeah.
But anyway, now let's go back into another one of the endeavors that you are doing, which is the CBD products. Can you talk about that?
I can't talk about that, and I just want to just make one final comment before we transition.
Sure.
One of the things that that I have witnessed, and that has also been discussed, is that parents play a crucial role in the development of their children.
Absolutely, yes.
And one of the things that I have heard countless times by law enforcement is that when they are out in the general public and they walk into a convenience store, they're going into a grocery store, they're going into the pharmacy, or they're just out and they're in their uniform, and there is a 3-year-old or a 5-year-old that is acting out, and the parent says that if you don't be good, he's going to arrest you. That is the start of putting that negative condensation in that young's mind to think that this person in this uniform is going to do harm to you. So as parents, please be cognitive of the fact that you are the front line to this young mind. And I understand that it might be out of frustration when you make those type of comments, but those comments can leave lasting negative impressions.
I agree. Now getting back to I got your pamphlet here. It's very interesting. Can you speak about that if you might?
So,
how did it start? How did it start? Give me the grind. How did the idea come into your head? Give the folks a little understanding.
I am going to give you the truth, the down dirty how I found myself in the cannabis industry. Okay. So going back to basketball, my college teammate, Katino Mobley,
okay.
reached out to me when Rhode Island was the 11th state to become a medical state in the country, and asked me who was the most powerful person in the state that could help with this initiative. And at that time, he already was working with a mutual associate that we both knew that was assisting him. So as I started to look into the industry and having there was these two brothers that were franchise owners of a popular ice cream business over by Brown University. And they brought me and one of the partners for the dispensary, and sat us down and basically opened Pandora's box in my mind, showing us all of the different ice creams, all of the different toppings, and basically saying that all of these things could actually be infused with CBD to help folks with anxiety, help folks with inflammation, and this, that, and the other. And so as a kid growing up, like most, I looked at cannabis as something that was a gateway drug. It was something that was not going to do anything good for me, this, that, and the other. And then to see that, a Cuttino Mobley, who unfortunately had to step out of the NBA because of medical conditions, found himself using the very product that he was looking to bring to the state of Rhode Island. So while I was going through the process of the application and going to the public hearings and the location of the dispensary, the location of the cultivation, I just continued to just start absorbing all of this information about something that was a part of the health and wellness. Looking at the pharmaceutical industry and seeing folks that were on 5 or 6 pills, and the first pill the first pill was causing side effects, so they needed to take a second pill to counteract that, and then they were having side effects to that one. And so as I started doing consultation for the patients at the dispensary, once it became open, I was just hearing all of these different stories of these different ailments, this, that, and the other. And so I really started to look at hemp and cannabis differently. I was looking at it from a medical perspective. And as I continued to go through my journey and starting to learn more and more about it, I found myself more intrigued. I have a mother that is, 30 years, multiple sclerosis.
Wow.
And she and I had a conversation like, is this something that you would consider taking, Mom? Because I know all of the different side effects of the medications that she had been taking over the years. So when she said that she would be open to it and that her neurologist had talked to her about it, and then I started guiding her as to and also even providing her with some of the different products that were out there, she started to, it was a shock to me, but I was happy that my mother, again, the person that was the, foundation, the person that was guiding me, the person that told me no to drugs, this, that, and the other, was very open to this. And then I started finding myself having more conversations with family and friends and strangers. And the one thing that I pride myself on is that I would only bring the conversation up when asked. I didn't want to feel like I was pushing anything on anybody. I already knew that people were mind warped because we were all warped into what we thought about cannabis and marijuana. So Harmless Health LLC is just a business entity that I had created because as I started further going into this, I wanted to make sure that I protected myself because I was still working as a government worker for the state of Rhode Island. And so I didn't want to get myself caught up in possibly getting, harassed or fired because I was involved in the industry.
Now, let me ask you a question. Now I'm going to be devil's advocate for a minute. if I came up to you and said, I'm skeptical, I'm not sure I want to engage in your products, what would you tell me then? Because I know people probably asking the same thing I'm asking.
Well, it's funny that you say that, because at one of your basketball tournaments, I actually came out as a vendor in the state of Massachusetts selling CBD water and sodas. And at that time, folks' mind were so far left on THC, they wasn't even thinking about CBD. Now, here we are 5 years later, and now you can find CBD in a gas station, general corner store. There's even CBD stores that are opening up. And so, to answer your question, if someone said that they were skeptical, and I said, and then I would say, well, I can understand your skepticism. And then I would say that I too have my own. And then I would go and tell a personal story about me being involved in a car accident that almost left me paralyzed, where I didn't know that I had a fracture in my L5-S1. It was 2 weeks after my car accident that I went to have an MRI, that the doctors then came and said, "How are you still walking?" And so I also end up having some cancerous blood cells that had popped up in some of my my blood and my polyps. So what I did is I actually went on a regimen to see if it was true what they said about cannabinoids. They say cannabinoids actually kill all bad cells and leave the good cells alone, whereas chemotherapy and radiation kills everything. So, to my surprise, after going through that regimen and being a patient in the program, I actually saw the benefits of pain management. I saw the benefits of me being able to keep a slender fit, because till this day, it'll be 8 years since that car accident happened that I have not had a surgery on my back.
Wow. Now, let me ask you another question before Mike chimes in. Okay, I'm interested in what you have. How would I know where to go and what do I need, and how can I circumvent? I'll find out exactly what products might be beneficial to me.
Well, one of the things that is still being done is research and development on this industry. And so one of the things that I would tell any patient, any client, any person that is interested in looking at cannabis as an alternative medication is that it is going to be a trial and error. It's going to be a trial and error determining how many milligrams that you're able to take that's going to help give you the benefits. It's going to be a trial and error to see what side of the sativa or the indica is going to be best for you. It's going to be a trial and error in looking at the different ratio, the ratio of both THC and CBD, because they both work together. Through our research, we were able to find out that, CBD can actually counter THC. So to use an example, say if you took 50 milligrams of a THC product and that you start getting a feeling of that you were overwhelmed. Well, if you were to turn around and have 50 milligrams of CBD, well, that CBD would then help counteract it. And then depending on the methods, like you got oral, meaning like you have tinctures, you got suckers, you got lozenges, you got gummies, you have cakes, you got any food product that can be infused, you have beverages. So anything that seeps into your glands is going to get into your system faster, whereas anything that you have to digest has to go through the digestive system. And that's the reason why when folks say, oh, I don't like edibles or this, that, and the other, because it can take 45 minutes. It can take an hour. It can take 2 hours. I've even had a person it took 3 hours before they got an effect. from the first dosage that they took. Your body fat, plays a factor. Your metabolism plays a factor. So, this is going to be a trial and error for folks to have to go through to determine what is going to work best for them. But I also suggest that you speak to a professional, somebody that has, spent time in this industry to talk to help you while you go on your journey, and then also log it. Log what you're doing so that you have a point of reference to know what you like, what you don't like, so that as you start finding that it is helping and giving you benefits, then that's good. Hello?
Michael might be frozen.
Oh, okay.
Oh, we're good. Okay.
All right. I don't think he got a chance to do a rebuttal because I think he's still frozen.
Yeah, I think he is. So I'll follow up real quick. So if you don't mind me asking, what did you major in college?
I actually I got my undergrad in urban engineering, and then I got my master's in public administration.
So as I'm listening to you talk about both issues tonight, and the ability to communicate both and articulate both, is very interesting for me to hear, because I haven't heard anybody talk about these two subjects at all, ever. And
that's why I got them on my
show. So how do we help you grow and expose your issues? How do we help?
Well, I think that you guys are helping me right now by just giving us a platform to be able to, talk about this and talk about this openly, where this can be, right now we're live, and I'm assuming that this is something, this show folks will be able to revert back to
Absolutely.
Be able to listen to. So this really right now is helping to give the platform for folks to understand that, what we're talking about, again, is from, my personal experience and the things that we're doing. And, I don't expect everybody to agree with what, our approach. But the fact that we have, I always walk into a place and I was like, all I need is just one. All I'm looking for is just one person, because now that one person can then take what we give them, and then they can go and they can speak to two, and then maybe their influence that 2 or 3, and then now it just slowly sprouts. Mm-hmm. So just having this platform, really, gentlemen, is just, again, I'm humbled, I'm grateful and appreciative that you've given me this opportunity and that you have questions. I know that there's a lot of folks that have questions.
Absolutely.
And there's folks that may not know how to ask the questions. So here we are having a conversation, having dialogue about some 2 pretty interesting topics, as you say, that are taking place, that are a part of my daily lifestyle.
Now, for the folks who are tuning in, and hopefully we have a lot, I hope so, how could they get in touch with you? How do they reach you? Because I guarantee they're going to be impressed, and they're going to want to probably speak to you or get in touch with you some way or somehow.
Well, again, on the nonprofit side, you can get in touch with us at the Lights and Sirens International at gmail.com. That's our email address. You can also reach out to us for those that are on the social media platforms of Instagram, Facebook, also in our YouTube channel. And then, my phone number is out there, so I have no problem. You can also call me directly at the 401-286-5134. Again, that is 401-286-5134. And if you have any questions, if you want to support what we're doing, if you're looking for some assistance and guidance with, your health and wellness, we'll try to help you the best way we can.
And Mike and I will do the same thing as well. We're here to support you and what you're doing. I'm so proud of you, and you have impressed me Beyond Limits, and I'm honored to have you on my show, and I'm sure Mike is as well. We got about 3 minutes. Mike, what's your final thoughts before I kick
No,
it
I
back to
just
you?
this was a great, interesting discussion.
Yes.
And I'm actually kind of glad we went away from the basketball stuff. To be honest, it was kind of a nice introduction, but this was much more interesting to me, and it got my attention immediately. And I had done some research. I had done some research as far as what we want to talk about tonight. But this was nice to hear, and I'm glad to support and do whatever I can to help. And it was a great pleasure meeting you.
Well, again, both Mikes, thank you so much for the opportunity. Who knew last Saturday while in New Bedford that this was going to lead to a radio interview about not only my career, but what we're doing with our nonprofit organization and what we're doing on the holistic medicine side.
Now, what are your final thoughts before we have to go? Again, I'm honored to have you on my show. I'm so proud of you, my man. And you're welcome to come back. If you got anything going on, please feel free to come on my show. Mike and I will be honored to have you on again.
Well, one of the things that I would say is that July 8th of this year, we will be hosting our 4th annual Bocce Ball Community Outreach Program in Providence, Rhode Island on historic Federal Hill. For those that want to come out and just watch and see, participate, please, reach out so that we can get you registered to come and support our community outreach, but also be a part of the conversation. And I just have to say, I am humbly grateful for this opportunity, but I more importantly have to give a shout out to the Cape Verdean community, because it was the Cape Verdean community through the Fernandez, the Samitos, the Demoras that helped me. Oh, and the Duwats that have given me.
Oh yes.
that have helped me to better understand the culture, to better appreciate it. And I'm looking forward to coming to New Bedford and getting some of that Cape Verdean food and some of that grog.
Oh, you know that. That's going to happen. They don't know what that is, but we know. But again, I want to thank you for coming on my show. And folks, thank you for tuning in. Sports Corner with the Con Man on the Sports Empire Network. Next week, we have Stephen Cooper, middle linebacker from the San Diego Chargers. Again, I want to thank you, my man, Mr. Bakari. I'm going to give you my props. Thank you for coming on the show. This is going to be seen all around. And I want to thank you for coming on my show. Mike, any final thoughts?
No, this was a great show. So
well,
happy
again,
to participate.
Ladies and gentlemen, thank you for tuning in. Tune in next week. Sports Corner with the Con Man on the Sports Empire Network. My man, Mr. Bakari, thank you.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Have a good night, y'all.